Where to begin? All right, let's try at a week ago. We arrived on Vancouver Island in Canada from Bella Coola on a 10-hour ferry. I think that we strike people as being obviously not from around here. I think it's the truck. I think it's a dead giveaway. But we have had countless people stop us and ask us where we're from, where we're going, what we're up to, what our plans are. And maybe this is a little bit of insight into the way we travel. We have very loose plans typically when we show up. We have ideas, things that we're intrigued by, but we love to leave a lot of room in our schedule for suggestions when they come up. Because people always stop us and are like, "You're not from around here. What are you up to?" And I just love that we have found that locals are always so incredibly generous with their knowledge and their experience in an area. And if you express excitement, that will always be reciprocated with some of the most incredible recommendations. So we love to leave a lot of room open for that kind of experience to unfold, because we're the type of people that at this rate, we have enough experience to know a good suggestion when we hear it. So Malcolm Island, it kept coming up. Every single person who stopped us was like, "Do you have plans to go to Malcolm Island? Because if you don't, you need to make plans." Luckily, it was at least on our radar. We were aware of it. But the number of times that it came up, it just made it so clear that that was something that we needed to prioritize. So a short 25-minute ferry to the east of Vancouver Island is Malcolm Island. It is historically was a Finnish settlement. They went out there because they were looking for a place to be able to farm and to build homes, I quote, without building codes. They wanted to build homes like they had in Finland. They didn't want to have to play by anybody's rules. They ended up out in Malcolm Island, and it sounds like that was maybe like 6 or 7 generations ago based on some of the conversations that we had while we were there. So we decided to take the ferry to Malcolm Island, and while we're waiting in line, we can see the boat coming to pick us up, and this really lovely man approaches us. We get to talking. He's asking us what our plans are when we're out on the island. And one of the reasons why this island in particular was on our radar as a point of interest is because the orcas go to this one particular point and they love to rub their bellies on the pebble-like stones in the water. And there's a whole bunch of theories as to why they do that. But anyways, he was like, "Oh, one of my biggest recommendations if you're coming to Malcolm Island is to go out to Bear Point and meet Troy." Troy is the scientist who's been out there for 28 years studying the orcapod that comes to this area to rub their bellies. And Alden, the man who we met at the ferry, is not born and raised on the island, but has been living out on the island for 20 plus years. And he said that Troy has been out there studying those whales for as long as I've been here. So we knew that that was something that we needed to go check out well before we showed up. And in fact, he wasn't the only person that mentioned that we needed to go out and talk to Troy. Anyways, we had a lot of incredible conversations with Alden before we got on the ferry. And, you know, as we got on the ferry and we loaded up, we said goodbye and kind of figured that would be the last time that we saw him. So we arrive in the island. It's very small, very manageable to do the vast majority of it in just a day or two. But we had camp spot reservations for 2 nights at Bear Point, which is where the orcas can be seen. So we planned to just go out there and spend the vast majority of our time on the island out at that point to try to maximize our opportunities to potentially see the orcas, obviously. So for the next 2 days, that was pretty much how the plan played out. We had our camp spot. We would walk out to the point. We chatted with Troy, which was absolutely incredible. He is in a previous episode of the podcast. We had an absolutely incredible time talking to him about how he came to find out about the orcas here and then the research that he's been doing over the last 28 years. So if that's something of interest to you, which I strongly recommend, you can go back to a previous episode for that to meet Troy. But our time in the area was absolutely wonderful. We had spent our last night of our reservation at Bear Point, and we were planning on taking the ferry back that day. But everyone that we had met so far, everybody was so excited because it was Salmon Day. And Salmon Day is a celebration that the island puts on to celebrate the incoming salmon for the season. There's a great deal of fishing industry around here, I'm sure. A lot of First Nation presence. Everybody loves the salmon in this area. And it's such a cool way, in our opinion, to mark the season of the salmon coming in. They had a parade in town, and then there was going to be some festivities out at the baseball field, and then an additional dance at the community center that night. So because everybody was so excited about it, it just felt like there was no way that we could leave on Salmon Day. So we decided to go downtown. We got a great spot. We watched the parade, which was absolutely amazing.
Happy Salmon Day!
It was just really fun to see everybody's. It was a very small, there's only 800 people that live, I think, on Malcolm Island. It's a pretty small place. But the world's smallest burl was on a wagon being drawn. There was some fun cars. The seniors came out and they were throwing candy. It was just a lovely time.
Oh, already having a fun day.
After the parade, we kind of decided just to saunter down to the baseball field to kind of see what those festivities were before we headed out to figure out where we were going to camp for the night, because we no longer had a camp spot available. When we get to the baseball field, we've kind of wandered around, we've kind of checked out everything, and we were about to leave, and we ran into Alden. And Alden was saying, he was like, oh, this is like this whole event. I put this on. I'm so glad you all decided to stay and check it out. And he's like, oh, and by the way, my sister, who was also a triathlete, or who was a triathlete, she and I are also putting on a triathlon tomorrow. Would you guys be interested? We were like, don't threaten us with a good time, which genuinely did sound intriguing. It was a pretty short, I would say even shorter than a sprint triathlon. We were very intrigued, but the problem is we don't have bikes. We don't carry them, but we had everything else. Like, we've got gear to run and gear to swim, but we didn't have bikes. And Alden was like, well, if you're interested, I can find you a bike. We decided to kind of ponder the idea because, again, we had stayed for Salmon Day, which was already a day extra than we were planning. We're like, well, do we stay like a whole nother day? We came out here planning only doing 2 days on Malcolm Island. That would leave us here for 4 days. And, I think that whenever you have an idea of what your plan is, there's always this decision, depending on how like tight or loose your plans are, you're kind of like weighing your options of what it would look like to deviate from the plans, what it would look like if you were going to be doing this new thing. So we decided to like walk around the festivities just one more lap so we could think about it. And then we were like, this sounds fun. It's not every day somebody offers a triathlon or like a community put on event. We just are so transient. Like, we don't really have a way of ever like participating in any community really other than like our own friend group. And there was just something about it that as soon as he said it, both Owen and I were like, I think that we have to do this. Like, I think that we can't say no. So we decided to track down Alden and tell him we're in. We'll totally do it if you can find us a bike. And he was just, as soon as we found him, he was just like, oh, this is amazing. I don't think that he was fully expecting us to take him up on the offer. But as soon as we said, all right, we're in, and he was just like, well, do you both want to do it? Do you both want to do the whole thing? Because the idea was if he found one bike, we could do it as a team. So one of us would swim, the other would bike, and then whoever did the swim would also do the run there at the end. And he was just like, well, are you sure you want to do it as a team? Like, do you want to do it alone? Like, you both want to do it entirely on your own? And we looked at each other and we were like, I mean, that would be so fun too, but I also don't want to inconvenience anybody. And you would have to now find two bikes instead of just one for us to be able to participate. And this conversation is going down at the tent where the sign up and registration for the triathlon is. And so there's a whole bunch of other women from the community, and they pick up on the conversation and they were like, oh, are you kidding me? We'll totally find you two bikes. No question. You don't even worry. If you want to do this, we'll figure out the rest. No problem. And when that kind of generosity is being offered, we're not really ones to say no. So Owen and I left the event with registration for two individuals in the BLT triathlon. And it's called the BLT triathlon because it is the Big Lake triathlon. Big Lake being the name of the lake that the swim portion was going to be taking place in. And ironically, in a twist of fate, that was actually where we were planning on camping for the night, which is another reason why we were like, I don't feel like we can say no to an event that is literally taking place in the morning where we will already be. So we were like, if it's not too much of a hassle, we'll take you up on the bikes. We will be camped there tonight, and we will also extend our assistance in setting up in the morning since we will already be there. They were thrilled, but we left with our numbers and we headed to camp. And later that night, we were texting our families and we're like, so in an interesting turn of events, this island that we were only supposed to be here for 2 days, I think that we're going to end up staying like 4.5 days so we can do this triathlon. And my parents, you know, they were just like, are you sure these people are actually gonna, like, they don't know you from anybody. Are you sure they're gonna be giving you bikes? And Owen and I just knew the enthusiasm and the willingness that all of these people expressed in the excitement of us being from out of town and having traveled for 8 years and to happen to be here and to happen to be interested in doing this triathlon. I mean, they were just so excited and enthusiastic. There was no question in our minds if there were going to be two bikes for us to participate. So later that evening, Owen and I had already had dinner. We were just hanging out. And sure enough, a bike shows up at our camp spot the night before the triathlon, not even on the day of, with a promise for another bike being to us in the morning. So the next morning, we're up, we're walking Boo, starting to kind of like get warmed up and ready for the day. And we, sure enough, we helped set up very early on in the morning. And we got ourselves ready to do the BLT. And just to give you an idea of the length of this sprint triathlon, it was an 80-meter swim, a 6K bike, and a 2K run. So for the swim portion in Big Lake, I feel like I have to describe this water to you. It was something else. I've never swum in water like this ever before. So it's a lake in the interior of the island. It's very densely forested, the entirety of the island. But because of all the cedar trees and the pines, there's a lot of tannins in the water, and it dyes the water, and it looks like tea. I mean, you get 6 inches into the water and you can't see your feet anymore. It is so dark. I was promised that there were no leeches. That's always going to be my one concern with water that looks like that is if there's leeches. But there wasn't. So that morning before the race, as we were all getting ready and suited up for the whole thing to take place, Owen and I decided to hop in for a little warm-up swim, and it was the most insane experience. It was like swimming through coffee or something. It was so dark. Unless you lifted your head up to, see where you were going, it's very easy to swim off course in water that looks like that. Open water in general is actually quite difficult to swim in a straight line in. So we got ourselves warmed up. We both tested both bikes because Alden came through for us with the second bike in the morning. And the funny thing is, we didn't find out until well later who the bikes even belonged to. Turns out one of the bikes, the one that I was on, belonged to one of my competitors, which is just so sweet that the community rallied behind Owen and I to get us bikes to participate. But so we warmed up in the water. We warmed up, did a little jog, took the bikes out for a little spin. And before we knew it, the race was getting started. This episode of Camp Nowhere is brought to you by Red Arc. For the last 4 years on the road, our entire life has been running on Red Arc's power management systems. Whether we're charging our camera gear, powering Starlink for remote work, or making this podcast in the middle of nowhere, Red Arc always keeps everything running smoothly. They've spent decades perfecting their products based on customer needs, putting in countless hours to design and test the toughest mobile power solutions out there. Born in the rugged terrain of Australia, Red Arc has been leading the way in mobile power solutions for 45 years. For more information about reliable off-grid power, go to headnowhere.com/redarc, which can also be found in the show notes. Hey there, Mac here. I don't know why I said that. It's always Mac. Anyways, if you're enjoying Camp Nowhere, maybe you would want to consider checking out our Patreon. By joining, you'll get access to a ton of cool things, such as the ad-free version of this podcast, early screenings to our films, behind-the-scenes glimpses into life on the road, and a whole lot more exclusive content. Plus, your support helps us keep creating and improving as multifaceted storytellers. We legitimately could not do it without you, so a big thank you to everyone who has already joined us in our sunny little corner of the internet. If you're curious, take a spin around at headnowhere.com/Patreon. See you there. So at the start, Owen and I took the lead. To give you a little bit of background, Owen and I were collegiate swimmers, so we're very comfortable. I've done a fair bit of triathlons. I've done some open water swims. So this kind of thing is a very familiar activity, I would say, for us. So Owen and I were neck and neck for the whole swim, but there at the very, very end of the swim, I overtook him. And it was funny as I was getting out of the water. This is kind of embarrassing. Okay, so Owen and I are very competitive with one another. I do believe that is just the nature of being collegiate swimmers on the same swim team. There's just like some built-in competitive nature between the two of us, all in good fun, obviously. But I do maybe remember turning around and saying to Owen as I was coming out of the water, "I got you, bro." I overtook you. And then one of the women who helped us get signed up, she was just like, "Oh, Mac, you're doing so good." And I was like, "I beat my husband." I was so excited. And a little bit of backtracking, Owen and I did decide the night before that we were going to do the race together. So the plan was, in the transition from swim to bike, we would then take off in the bikes together and then just do the whole race together. It's easier to do that for the biking and the running more so than the swimming. But so through the transition, I was a good bit faster than Owen. And so as I was picking up the bike, he was still needing to put on another shoe. So I just told him, I was like, "Hey, just catch up with me on the bike. I'm not going to go crazy fast. I'll just see you out there." So we agreed to meet out on the course and I take off. Owen did not catch back up ultimately. spoiler alert, I will circle back to what happened for Owen during his race. Let's continue with mine. So the bike was amazing, so beautiful, dense forest, so dark, just so lush and green. Barely any light makes it through. It's just absolutely incredible. So lovely bike, transition to run, very difficult. I am not a runner, never have been. I hope to one day be better at it, but today I'm not. So I run walk the start to get my legs moving in the right direction, and then finished really strong.
It was a late show and a bit of a dark horse. She's been traveling the world for 8 years with her partner, husband, and borrowed a bike, rode it maybe once, and ended up winning this category. So our 2024 champion is Mac Krogh in a time of 33:26.
Ultimately, I came across the finish line as the first solo athlete, as in doing the whole race alone. So I won both the female, I was the top finishing female, and I was also just the top finishing individual, which was so awesome. Was not expecting that, but you know, as a competitive person, I'll take it and I'll be pretty stoked about it. But I had a great time. It was such a fun race. Everybody was so supportive of each other that was racing. Everybody was cheering one another on. It was so much fun. I came across the finish line. They took my number, gave me my time. I'm kind of like going into the snacks that they always offer at the end of the races. And I just haven't seen Owen. Owen has not come off the course yet. I did see him as I was making my return on the run portion, and I could sense that maybe something was off. And I felt very bad, but he did not indicate that he wanted me to stop or to talk about it until the race was over. So more time elapses than I think feels appropriate for how far behind Owen was from me. And I'm starting to get a little nervous, and I'm looking around to see if there's anybody who has a walkie-talkie that can see if anybody has had an injury on the course, because it just feels like Owen should have shown up by now. I'm thinking maybe I need to start running back to see if I can find him. And right before I'm about to start heading up the hill towards where I suspect he is, he comes down the hill, crosses the finish line, and he looks pretty bummed with his performance. And so I was like, Owen, what happened out there? What's going on? Turns out he had a little bit of an issue with his sinuses, is what we're suspecting. Both of us had had some form of a cold about a month ago, and we both kind of felt like we were over it. Owen, thought that he was over it as well. And he said as soon as he got out of the water from the swim, it just felt like something was off, like in his head. He said everything felt harder than it should have been. Just like nothing was kind of feeling right. He said that he couldn't really hear. His equilibrium was off. He just felt really out of whack. And unfortunately, after the turnaround of the run, so he's coming back for the last kilometer of the run, he said that just all of a sudden he had to throw up. And so he completely evacuated his breakfast. And he said as soon as that happened, he was good, which is great. But also, it's kind of a bummer that happened at the very, very end of the race. And he said it was night and day difference. He could hear, his equilibrium was fine, and he was on his way. So Owen didn't necessarily have his best race, but he did win. He was the only solo man to enter the race, so he did still take first place. With an asterisk, I guess. He was the only one.
Is another 8-year-long world traveler is Owen Chikanasawa.
Woo! Yeah, Owen!
But it was such a fun race. We were both so happy that we decided to kind of mix up our plans and take these people up on such a cool offer to be able to participate in a fun race with what felt like the entire town. It felt like everyone showed up and was either cheering or participating or volunteering out on the course. It was such a fun way to meet everybody in town. And after I crossed the finish line, I had a little interview on the microphone to everybody who had came out. And it was such a lovely opportunity to be able to thank all of these people who just don't even know, they don't know us from anyone. And they all went out of their way to make sure that we had what we needed to be able to like participate in this event that they put on for their town. And it was just so heartwarming. And we had so many awesome, sweet people come over and talk about how honored that they were that we had stopped and that we had decided to do this. And it just kind of felt like we belonged somewhere for a little bit. And that was really, it was really nice and it was really meaningful. So ultimately, the BLT race was concluded at a little restaurant that we had already there's like 3 restaurants on the whole island, but the restaurant right across from where the ferry drops you off on the island, Coho Joe's, everybody was awarded a BLT naturally. And then we had the award ceremony where Owen and I both received our medals, which are made of a cross section of yew wood. And if you're not familiar, it is just an absolutely gorgeous, very rare hardwood. Grows very, very slowly. It's very expensive because of how slow it grows and how hard the wood is. And then it had the logo for the BLT race emblazoned on it in a wood burning, which is adorable. It's a little salmon riding a bicycle. But the whole experience, when looking at it as a whole, I feel honestly quite overwhelmed. I kind of realized in the moment that something was happening, that it's gonna be a story that I maybe tell for the rest of my life. 8 years on in life on the road, we often, we're just like paying witness to the way people are living. We're not really participating in it. You can only do that so much while passing through and being around for such a short amount of time. But it just felt like this community really opened their arms to us. And that kind of generosity is what's kept us moving for all of these years. All of the locals that recommended that we go to Malcolm Island, that generosity, but then also to show up and to have like the vast majority of the town know your name over the course of 4 days is just so incredibly heartwarming. And I just feel so lucky that we have the ability to be on the receiving end of such warmth and generosity. I will always be thankful for that. Sometimes the world feels like a big and scary place, but then I remember that we've had these incredibly beautiful experiences like this one. And we left Malcolm Island this morning, actually. And, I cried. It just feels nice to be a part of something and to have people know your name and wave at you when you drive down the street. Yeah, this experience will stick with me for the rest of my life. Malcolm Island was one of the best experiences we have had on the road in a long time. But if I can impart anything on you, the listener, is that really and truly this kind of generosity and welcoming is not uncommon. We come in contact with it all the time. Truly, we really do. And I never want to forget that this exists. that there are people that they don't know you, but they want to help you do something fun and participate and feel like you belong. And it was really lovely. I'm so thankful for our time on Malcolm Island. And before I go, I feel like this is another side story from this whole experience, but I think that it so beautifully sums up what's going on out there on Malcolm Island. So I came to find out after the race that the bike that I was given to use for the race was somebody who was doing the team event. So it was 3 different participants contributing to one team, 1 swimmer, 1 biker, 1 runner. And the girl was doing just the swim portion for her team, so she didn't need the bike. And after the event, I got a chance to meet her. And I was like, how did you come to live on Malcolm Island? And she's like, I don't live here. I came here last year on a road trip. I was here for just 1 day. And I just couldn't believe how kind everyone was and how many people waved at me just like driving down the street. And she's in between years in college, and she was looking for a summer job, and she saw that there was a job at Coho Joe's where the BLTs were being served after the race. And she just decided that she wanted to get a job on the island this summer to be able to experience that community a little bit more. And now she's so a part of it. I mean, she was the one who contributed the bike, so I was able to participate. And I just thought it was so cool that somebody came here last year, had less than 24 hours to and just really like had an incredible experience, enough so to decide to drive 15 hours from where she goes to college to come here and work at a restaurant for the summer. So yeah, if you find yourself in Vancouver Island and you're on the north end of the island and you got some time, take the ferry out of Port McNeill and do yourself a favor and go to Malcolm Island. Go to Bear Point, meet Troy. If you can find a sweet man named Alden, tell him Mac and Owen said hi. All right. Thanks for listening. See you next time. If there is one thing that people ask me more than anything else, it's how I store my clothes on the road. I have been using the same set of Eagle Creek packet cubes for the last 8.5 years. Since 1975, Eagle Creek has logged more miles and cleared customs more than anyone in the business. That hard-won insight is built into everything they make, from luggage to packing cubes and everything in between. In fact, I store my film in an Eagle Creek bag that was handed down to me from my grandmother who used it in her travels over 20 years ago. And guess what? It's still going strong. Check them out at headnowhere.com/Eagle Creek. As longtime fans of Eagle Creek, we're proud to have them as a part of our everyday life, but also as a sponsor of Camp Nowhere. 1 trekking pole. 2 trekking pole. I was just setting up my trekking poles because we are about to go for a hike, and I had a thought. I love my trekking poles so much. Just setting them up gets me so stoked to be out on trail. And I think that just having the right piece of gear for the job just kind of does that to you. It makes you excited to get outside and do what you love. As a self-proclaimed gear nerd, I have made detailed gear guides plus some handy affiliate links and discount codes for brands that we personally know, love, and trust. If you decide to grab anything from those links or gear guides, it helps support all of our creative projects that we're working on, from films to podcasts and life on the move. So, if you are gearing up for your next adventure, check it out at headnowhere.com/gear, and thank you so much for helping us stay rolling. Okay, gotta run. This trail is not gonna hike itself.
Bye.